Once we have determined the two triangles are congruent by one of our 5 different methods, we can set the sides that are congruent equal to each other and solve for the variable. So some of the times you're going to see in these problems that you might have to solve a system of equations, so we're going to start with one of those. But before we start with that, let's remember about isosceles triangles or equilateral triangles. So isosceles triangles have at least 2 congruent sides, and the 2 base angles are going to be congruent to each other. And the base angles, if you remember, in an isosceles triangle, if your 2 sides that are congruent are here, your base angles are the ones that are across from them at the bottom. So in number 1, we are going to go through it and remind ourselves how to solve the system of equations. And we are going to solve most of these by elimination. So you want to make the variables, one variable, cancel out. This means that it needs to be the same number but have opposite signs. So when we add them together, it equals 0. When we look at number 1, we can either look at the 1 and 1 for our x or the 3 and the 7. If I wanted the 3 and the 7 to be the same number, I would have to make both of them a 21. That would mean I'd have to multiply the top one by 7 and the bottom one by 3. But if you look at the x's, we can see they are already the same number, so all we need are opposite signs. So if I multiply one of them by a -1, that means I have to distribute, so I'd get a -1x minus 3y equals -11. The bottom equation would stay the same, so it'd be a positive 1x plus 7y equals my 19. So now that the x's are the same number but different signs, when I add my 2 equations together, the x's cancel, and we end up with a positive 4y equals 8. And when we solve for y, we'd have to divide both sides by 4, and we would get y equals 2. Now if you remember, once you get the y value, you can substitute it back in for one of the equations. It can be either of the original equations or even after you have multiplied it by a number. I usually choose one of the first equations, so if I choose the top equation, so x plus 3y equals 11, but now if I know that the y value itself is a 2, I write x plus 3 times 2 equals 11, and I can simplify it for the x. So I can multiply this, so I get a 6 equals 11. Subtract my 6 from both sides, and I get x equals 5. Now, if this was a graphing question, you would graph it to see where they're going to cross, and this would actually be a coordinate, so 5, 2. But we're not graphing it, we're just solving it, and it'll be in our triangles where we need to solve it. For number 2, you can see that we are given that they are congruent equilateral triangles. So that tells us that all the sides will be the same to each other and they are congruent. If you can see, we can see that the 2 triangles are congruent by side, side, side. You will be asked something similar when you see your worksheet in class tomorrow, that you need to identify the method that they are congruent, and then you will have to find the x and y values and sometimes find what the sides are. On here, since we know that all the sides are congruent, I can set my 3x minus 12 equal to my x plus 4. And now we can solve for x. I want you to now solve for x. When you solve for x, if you subtract your x to the other side, you'd get a 2x minus 12 equals 4. If you add your 12 to the other side, you would get a 2x equals 16. And then divide both sides by 2, and we get x equals 8. Now, if you're wondering how in the world are we going to get what the y value is up here, but if you notice, it is the variable, or it is our angle, sorry about that, and if we have 3 congruent sides, or if it's equilateral, remember it is also equiangular. And when it is equiangular, all 3 angles are congruent and they equal 60 degrees. So I know that 3y plus 6, my angle given, has to equal 60 degrees. So let's go ahead and solve for y. If we subtract both sides by 6, we get 54 equals our 3y. Divide both sides by 3, and we get y equals 18. Now, to find all the missing sides, remember all of those sides are the same size. but we do need to plug in the x over here. So if we have 8 plus 4, that gives us a 12, so that means all of the sides are 12. Between the two triangles, since they are sharing a side, there are 5 different sides, and we know that all of those will be 12. Number 3, or a type of question like number 3, is going to be similar on your worksheet. We are given in our two triangles that AB is congruent to DE, and BC is congruent to EF, and angle B is congruent to angle E. We can see that these two triangles are congruent by side, angle, side, and we need to write that down of the reason why. Next, we need to find what the values are of x and y, and we need to draw or write all of our measurements into our picture, so go ahead, take a second to do that. Now that all of our measurements are drawn on our picture, we can set our different corresponding sides congruent to each other. And our 1 marks, so that would be over here and here, 7x plus 3y will equal 27. And our 2 marks, so 2x minus y, will equal the 4. Now, if you remember, this is a system of equations because we have x and y in both of the equations. Remember, up here, we need to make one of the variables have the same exact number but opposite signs. So again, if we look at the 7 and 2, the nearest number that both of those would divide into would be 14, and I would have to change both equations. If I look at the y's, I have a 1 and a 3. They are already opposite signs, what I want, but I need them to be the same number. But it's a lot easier to multiply one of the equations by something instead of both of them. So I'm going to make the y's a 3y and a negative 3y. That means that the second equation needs to become a negative 3y, so I need to multiply it by just a regular 3. And if I distribute to all 3 of them, we should get 6x minus 3y equals 12. The top equation, just copy that one over. Now that they're copied over, we just add them straight down. So 7 plus 6 is 13x. Negative 3y and a positive 3y cancel, which is what we want. 27 plus 12 gives me a 39. When I divide both sides by 13 to solve for my x, I get a 3. Now remember, it doesn't matter which equation you put this back into if you use one of these original purple equations or after I multiplied, but I usually choose the beginning ones because then they're a little bit smaller numbers. If we use, let's use the bottom equation, that's a little bit smaller numbers, then we can get 2 times 3, so our x is 3, minus y equals 4. This gives us a 6 minus y equals 4. When I subtract the 6 over, I get a y equals a negative 2, or a negative y equals negative 2, so my y itself will be a positive 2. Next, we need to plug those values in to find these remaining 4 sides in our triangle. So we have AB, BC, EF, and ED. 2 of them we were already given before, so AB is 27 and BC was 4, but we need to use our x and y numbers in our equations over here. So 2 times x, which is 3, minus our y, which is 2. So that gives us 6 minus 2, so 4. And we do the same thing for 7x minus plus 3y, and I want you to do that one yourself. So find the length of ED. All right, so you should be taking 7 times your x, so 3, plus 3 times your y, which is a 2. That gives us a 21 plus 6 to a 27 should be your answer there for the remaining side. In triangle ABC, we can see that AD is the perpendicular bisector, so we have to remember what that is. So AD bisects the opposite side. So that means that those two pieces are congruent, which is D is the midpoint, and it's perpendicular, so we know that those are both going to be 90-degree angles. So we've got 2 right triangles. We also know it says that AB is congruent to side AC, and we have the 2 triangles will be congruent by HL because we can see that it's a right triangle. We have a leg and a hypotenuse that are congruent, but also, if you notice, they do share a side in the middle. So they are also congruent by side, 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 because all three sides are congruent. And if you just look at this angle right here, you've got a side on both sides. So it'd also be side angle side. So on this one, there's really three different reasons of why our two triangles are going to be congruent. Next, when we label our picture, AB is 25 and AC is 3x minus 5. We can use that then to solve for our x. So 25 would be equal to 3x minus 5. To solve for x, we can add 5 on both sides. So we get 3x equals 30. Divide both sides by 3, and we get x equals 10. For the y value, you can see that ADC is supposed to be y plus 35. And if you notice, there are 90 degrees right there, so I want you to set up what your equation is going to look like to solve for y. Since we know that that angle is 90 degrees, you should have set up y plus 35 equals 90. And now to solve for y, you can subtract your 35 from both sides, and we get y equals 65. We do need to find what the two measures of these sides are. AB was already given to us as a 25, and AC should also be 25, but we always want to check. So 3 times our x, which was 10, minus 5, so we get 30 minus 5, and we do get 25. On number 5, we are given the picture, and that's about it to determine if these two triangles are congruent, and then by what method. But remember, we have vertical angles in the middle, so these are congruent by side, or angle, side, angle, because there's two different angles, and the side is between it, so angle, side, angle. When we are given our measurements, RP is 5x plus 2, and RT is 3x plus 8. Since these two triangles are already congruent, those are the two sides that will also be congruent to each other. So when they give us that PQ is 2x plus 4, we don't know what ST is over here, so there's nothing we can set equal with this 2x plus 4. We're just going to use these two pieces to solve for our x. So I want you to set up what is your equation for your x using just those two sides. Should have set up 5x plus 2 equals 3x plus 8. When we solve it, we would get a 2x equals 6, so x equals 3. Then we need to put that into each of the sides. This would be 2 times 3 plus 4, so 6 plus 4 is 10 for PQ. And since PQ is 10 and ST is going to be congruent to it, we know that that will also be 10 over here. When we put in our 3 into our x for the two hypotenuse, we have 15 plus 2, so we get a 17 for both of those sides. And you're probably wondering, how are we going to figure out what this third side is in the triangle? But it is a right triangle. And we can always use our Pythagorean theorem to figure out our missing side right there. And our missing side is either the A or the B, because we have the hypotenuse is 17. So I'm going to say that that's my A squared, and then I've got my 10 squared for the other side of it. So we've got A squared plus 100 equals 289. When we subtract over the 100, that will give us 189. We need to take the square root of 189, and we get right around 13.75. So that's what our QR and our S sides are equal to, is 13.75, and that's for both of them since they are congruent. For the last question, you need to do a little bit of review. And if we have a congruent statement, we want to pick out which statements over here are true out of our 8. So remember, if we number this as like our 1, 2, 3 for the letters, then we can match up the different sides. So TR is 1 and 2. AN is also 1 and 2, so that is a true statement. Next is TI, and that is 1 and 3. And AG is also 1 and 3, so that one is also true. RI is 2 and 3 for the first triangle, and NG is also 2 and 3, so we've got a third congruent statement. But TI is 1 and 3, and N and A is then 2 and 1, so those would not be the same. Sorry, I meant an X through that, are not the same congruent, so they're not congruent to each other. For the angles, we're going to do the same thing. So angle T is 1, angle A is our 1 again, so those are congruent. Angle R is a 2, angle N is a 2, and those are also congruent. Angle I is a 3, angle G is also a 3, so we can see that those are congruent. Angle A is a 1, and angle N is a 2 in the same triangle, so that is definitely not one that is true. What I would like you to do in this last part is I want you to write down any ideas or any questions that you have that you need to ask your teacher and bring that with you to class tomorrow, and that way you can ask your teacher any of the things that you still have questions about.